Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be tackling human rights. Human rights, it's a really important concept in international relations, especially for those of you out there studying for the UPSC.
Absolutely.
This one's for you, but obviously,
The cornerstone.
it's relevant for everyone. We'll be looking at the complexities of it.
Yeah.
But the main kind of thing we're going to be looking at is how states are kind of both the biggest protectors of human rights,
Yeah.
but also the biggest violators.
It is, it's a paradox, isn't it?
It really is. So how do we even begin to kind of unpack that?
Well, I think to start off, we need to look at it from a historical point of view.
Yeah, okay.
So the idea of states protecting civil liberties and human rights,
Mm-hmm.
this goes way back before we even had the international human rights regime.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, the Magna Carta,
Right.
the Enlightenment thinkers, all of these things were the seeds that were sown long before the UN.
So it wasn't just in the 20th century everyone suddenly went, human rights matter.
Exactly. The post-World War II era, with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other,
Yes,
key documents, that was a turning point.
for sure.
But it was building on what was already there.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, it was mainly Western nations, but then later on, post-communist states and developing countries, they all joined in and added their own perspectives to it.
It's really interesting when you think about the historical context of how these concepts actually came to be. Like you mentioned Europe, they seem to have a much stronger track record when it comes to human rights.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, a lot of factors go into that.
Sure.
But I'd say one of the most important is just the level of agreement
Mhm.
between European states about how important human rights are.
Yeah.
It's embedded in their institutions and their legal frameworks.
So then why don't we shift gears a bit
Yeah.
and look at why states support human rights on like an international level?
Okay.
Because there's a lot of different schools of thought when it comes to this, right?
Oh, absolutely. So you've got the liberals, and they say supporting international human rights. That's just part of being a liberal democracy. It's about supporting freedom and democracy across the world.
And that's in their own self-interest as well?
Kind of, yeah. Then you've got the realists,
Mm-hmm.
and they're much more pragmatic.
Okay.
They say supporting human rights, it's a way to get what they want,
Yeah.
which can lead to, picking and choosing
Yeah.
when they support human rights and when they don't.
So not pure altruism then.
Often not. A really good example is the U.S. during the Cold War.
Okay.
They were always criticizing the Soviet bloc for violating human rights,
Right.
but they often ignored it when their allies did the same thing.
That does raise questions about how effective promoting human rights globally can actually be.
It does.
And then you've got people like Noam Chomsky who are even more radical.
Yeah.
He says powerful states just use human rights as a cover.
As a smokescreen.
Yeah.
For what they really want, which is just more power.
That's a whole other layer of complexity, isn't it?
It is. It forces you to look beyond what people say and see what's really happening.
So how effective is the international human rights system at actually protecting human rights,
Right.
especially when you have powerful states who often put their own interests first?
It's the big question. And honestly, state sovereignty usually wins out.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about the big, powerful countries.
Well, look at the Soviet Union during the Cold War.
Exactly.
All that international condemnation didn't really change anything, did it?
No, it didn't. And even now, you've got China getting criticized for its human rights record.
Right.
But because they're so powerful economically and politically, they don't really face any consequences.
It's almost like the more powerful you are, the more you can get away with.
Yeah, you could say that.
And then even countries like the U.S. that really push for human rights,
Mm-hmm.
they can still fall short when it comes to security,
Yeah.
Guantanamo Bay,
Yeah.
all those enhanced interrogation techniques. That really raised questions, didn't it?
It did. It became this huge debate about how to balance security and human rights.
A debate that's still going on.
Absolutely.
So even a country like the U.S., which really sees itself as a defender of human rights,
Mhm.
they still struggle with these issues.
Yeah, they do.
And I imagine it's even harder in conflict situations.
Oh, yeah. Trying to uphold human rights during a conflict is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And then you've got the power dynamics within the UN Security Council,
Yeah.
which often prevents any meaningful action.
Rwanda in 1994. That's a perfect example. The international community didn't really do much, and hundreds of thousands of people were killed.
Yeah, and Rwanda's not the only example. You've also got Srebrenica in 1995,
Yeah.
where thousands of Bosnian Muslims were killed. Another failure.
It's like the system that's supposed to protect human rights just freezes up when things get really bad.
Yeah, it's a harsh reminder that these institutions have their limits.
Yeah.
And that power politics often wins out.
But those tragedies did lead to some positive developments, right?
They did. You're talking about the International Criminal Tribunals.
Yeah, and eventually the International Criminal Court, the ICC, which is all about holding individuals accountable for genocide.
Crimes against humanity.
War crimes.
Yeah. Those were big steps forward.
Yeah, a little bit of light in all the darkness.
I guess so.
And we can't talk about holding states accountable without talking about NGOs like Amnesty International.
Oh, Amnesty.
They've been one of the leading voices on human rights for decades now.
They have.
So tell me a little bit more about them. Like, what do they actually do?
Well, Amnesty International, or AI as it's often called, they've been incredibly important in raising awareness about human rights abuses and pushing for change. They use all kinds of methods, from publicity and education to political pressure and legal action.
I know they're famous for their research and for focusing on individual cases.
Yeah.
But how do they actually try to achieve their goals?
It's a combination of working with ordinary people and high-level advocacy. So they'll investigate human rights abuses, publish big reports, and then mobilize their members and supporters to write letters to governments, protest, things like that.
It's amazing how they link individual action with global advocacy.
It is.
And they've had some pretty impressive successes, haven't they?
Oh, without a doubt. They've played a key role in campaigns to abolish the death penalty, to get political prisoners released, and just to shine a light on abuses in conflict zones and under authoritarian regimes.
It's really quite something. But I have heard some people criticizing Amnesty International.
Yeah, there are a few criticisms.
What are they?
Well, one of the most common ones is that they tend to focus more on human rights violations in democratic countries.
Okay.
Which makes some people think they're biased against the West.
So they're not paying enough attention to abuses in less democratic parts of the world.
Yeah, that's the argument. But Amnesty says they focus on the cases where they think they can have the biggest impact.
So being strategic with their resources.
Exactly. They also say that they work on human rights issues everywhere. But they have to be careful about building trust.
Yeah.
Especially in places where they might not be welcomed.
That's a tough balancing act.
It is. Trying to stick to your principles while also being realistic about how to change things.
Okay, so we've talked about states, international organizations, NGOs. What about us? Like ordinary people, what can we do?
Oh, that's such an important question. Because in the end, human rights begin with us.
Yeah.
With each of us.
Right.
It starts with knowing about the issues and understanding different points of view.
So do your research.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And luckily for you, there are tons of resources out there. Books, articles, documentaries.
I like those.
Deep dives like this one. The more you know, the better you are at having real conversations.
And taking action.
Right. So, okay, you've done your research and you know what's going on.
Yeah.
What next? How do you actually make a difference?
Yeah.
Well, there's so many ways to get involved. You can support human rights organizations.
Amnesty.
Like Amnesty. Or smaller grassroots groups. You can join campaigns, sign petitions, go to protests.
Right.
Use social media to spread the word. Even small things can make a difference.
So what about in our everyday lives?
So?
What can we do to actually live by these principles?
You can challenge discrimination when you see it. Speak up for people who are being silenced.
Yeah.
Teach your family and friends. Remember, human rights start with how we treat each other.
So we need to practice what we preach.
Exactly. And don't underestimate what you can do as an individual. Talk to people about these issues. Support policies that protect human rights. Vote for leaders who believe in them.
So it's about being informed.
Yes.
Getting involved.
Yes.
And making choices in our lives that show we care about human rights.
Exactly.
And for all our UPSC folks listening,
yes,
remember, this is what the UPSC is all about. Understanding human rights.
History.
The theories.
Yes.
The real world stuff. That's what's going to help you analyze international relations properly.
It's not just memorizing facts.
It's about thinking critically. And for everyone listening, the fight for human rights is never over.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
It is. But if we work together and stay involved,
we can make a difference.
We can make a world where human rights are truly universal. for everyone.
I love that. It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that we always need to be paying attention, challenging the way things are, adapting.
We've covered a lot today,
We have.
but there's always more to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break,
Okay.
but stick with us. When we come back, we'll dig even deeper into the nitty-gritty of human rights. We'll look at specific cases, successes, failures, and all the debates that are still going on. Welcome back to the show, everyone, where we're deep diving into human rights.
Yes.
So before the break, we were talking about NGOs
Mhm.
like Amnesty International
Yeah.
and how they try to hold states accountable, even the powerful ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's a constant battle, isn't it?
It really is. And for anyone studying for the UPSC, this is so important to understand these
Yeah.
nuances, these tensions.
It's not just about the theory.
Exactly.
It's about how it all plays out in the real world.
Right.
And we talked about the war on terror
Yeah.
and how that really challenged even the U.S.'s commitment to human rights.
Absolutely. That's a perfect example for anyone studying for the UPSC. The
Yeah.
interplay of security, national interest, and international law.
Yeah, it's like a case study.
It is. And what's so interesting is that the war on terror really sparked a global debate
Mhm.
about these measures.
Right.
Indefinite detention, enhanced interrogation techniques. It wasn't just other countries criticizing the U.S.
Yeah.
There was a huge debate within the U.S. itself.
It really became this battleground of values, didn't it?
It did.
Security versus liberty, national interest versus these universal principles.
And these debates are still going on today.
Yeah, in different forms.
Exactly. And this is where understanding different perspectives is crucial. For the UTSC especially,
Mhm.
let's take the realist viewpoint.
Okay.
It's useful for understanding how states behave, but it could also be used to justify ignoring human rights when it's convenient.
That's a really good point. We can't just accept one perspective as the absolute truth.
Right.
We have to weigh different arguments.
Think about the context, come
Yeah.
to our own conclusions.
And that's exactly what the UPSC is all about, isn't it?
It is. So let's use that approach to look at another real-world example.
Okay.
We talked about Amnesty International's successes,
Yeah.
but how do they choose which cases to focus on?
Right.
They've been criticized for paying more attention to open societies and sometimes ignoring abuses in less democratic states.
How do they respond to that?
Well, they admit that they do prioritize certain cases,
Okay.
but they say it's a strategic decision.
Not some ideological bias.
Exactly. They think they can get more done by focusing on governments that are more sensitive to public pressure.
So they're choosing their battles carefully.
They are. And they also say that they do work on human rights issues all over the world,
Mhm.
but they have to be careful about building trust.
Right, especially in places where they're not necessarily welcome.
Exactly.
It's a delicate balancing act.
It is. Trying to stay true to their mission while also being pragmatic about making change happen.
So we've talked about states,
International organization.
NGOs.
Yeah.
But what about us as individuals?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, human rights begin with us, with each and every one of us.
With how we treat each other.
It starts with awareness,
Yeah.
with educating ourselves about the issues, understanding the complexities.
So step one, do your homework.
Exactly. And luckily, there are tons of resources out there.
Yeah.
Books, articles, documentaries, deep dives like this one.
We like those.
The more informed we are, the better equipped we are.
To have meaningful conversations.
And to take action.
Okay, so we've done our research.
Mm-hmm.
We're aware.
What next?
How do we actually translate that knowledge into something real?
Into something that can make a difference.
Yeah.
Well, there are countless ways to get involved. You can support human rights organizations like
Amnesty.
Amnesty or smaller local groups working on specific issues.
Okay.
You can join campaigns, sign petitions, go to protests,
Mhm.
use your voice on social media.
Right.
Even small actions can contribute to a larger movement.
What about on a more personal level?
Yeah,
Are there things we can do in our everyday lives?
absolutely. When you see discrimination, challenge it.
Right.
Speak up for those who are being marginalized or silenced.
Yeah.
Educate your family and friends. Remember, human rights start with how we treat each other in our own communities.
It's about walking the walk,
It is.
not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of your voice.
Mhm.
Engage in respectful dialogue.
Yeah.
Advocate for policies that uphold human rights.
Right.
Vote for leaders who are committed to these values.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
Being informed, getting involved.
And making choices in our lives that reflect our value.
Our human rights value.
Exactly. And for our UPSC aspirants out there,
Yes.
This is what will help you analyze international relations in a deep and nuanced way.
it's not just about memorizing facts.
It's about developing a critical lens.
Exactly. And for everyone listening, remember that the fight for human rights is never over.
It's a journey,
It is.
not a destination.
It is. But by working together, by staying engaged,
Yeah,
we can make a world where human rights are truly universal.
for everyone.
For everyone. I love that.
Yeah.
A journey, not a destination.
Is
It's a good reminder that we have to stay vigilant.
always be questioning,
Yeah.
adapting to new challenges.
We've covered a lot of ground today,
We have.
but there's always more to explore.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break.
Good.
But stick with us. When we come back, we'll wrap things up
Okay.
and leave you with some final thoughts.
Sounds good.
And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future deep dives into the topics that matter.
Welcome back to our deep dive, everybody. We've been talking all about human rights.
We have.
It's a complex issue,
It really is.
but a really important one.
Absolutely. And for our UPSC listeners out there,
Yeah.
I hope this has given you a better sense of just how much human rights affects everything in international relations.
It's not just some separate subject.
Yeah.
It's woven into everything.
It is. Politics,
Economics.
culture, even culture. It's everywhere.
Before the break, we were talking about how Amnesty International chooses which cases to focus on.
Right.
And some people have criticized them for that,
They have.
saying that they give more attention to abuses in open societies
Yeah.
than in more closed or authoritarian regimes.
It's a valid point.
It is.
Hmm.
And it's something that Amnesty has had to think about.
They say that their approach is about strategy,
Mm-hmm.
not bias.
Okay.
They believe that they can achieve more concrete results by focusing on governments that are more open to public pressure.
So by doing that, they hope to set a higher standard for everyone. But it does raise questions about the limits of any single organization or approach to dealing with such a complex issue.
Absolutely. There's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to human rights.
So true.
Different actors,
Yes.
international organizations.
NGOs,
Everything.
they all have a part to play.
Yeah,
And it's often when they all work together that we see real progress.
I agree.
Which brings us back to that question we asked at the beginning of the show.
Okay.
Why would states, who are usually all about their own self-interest,
Yeah.
actually support human rights,
Mm-hmm.
which could end up limiting their own power?
It is a paradox.
We've looked at the different perspectives.
We have.
The liberals say promoting human rights is good for everyone in the long run.
Right.
And the realists say it can be used as a tool to get what you want on the world stage.
And we've seen how those motivations can lead to both good things and bad things.
Yeah.
States often pick and choose when they want to apply human rights principles.
Sometimes they even use the language of human rights to justify actions that completely contradict those principles.
It's messy.
It is. It can be really frustrating.
But we have to remember that the whole idea of global human rights is still relatively new.
Less than 100 years old.
Yeah.
We're still figuring it all out.
We are.
Progress can be slow
Uneven.
and often met with resistance.
Absolutely.
But we can't give up.
No, we can't.
We have to keep working towards a world where human rights are truly universal.
Exactly. It takes constant vigilance, critical thinking.
And a willingness to challenge the status quo.
It's not just up to states and international organizations.
It's up to all of us.
Every single one of us.
So for our listeners,
Especially those UPSC aspirants out there.
remember, understanding human rights isn't just about memorizing facts and figures.
It's about understanding the history,
Yeah.
the different theories.
And all the complexities of the real world.
It's about analyzing different perspectives,
Evaluating arguments,
forming your own opinions.
and recognizing that the struggle for human rights never ends.
It doesn't.
And that we all have a part to play.
We do.
And remember, even small actions can make a difference.
They can.
Whether it's supporting human rights organizations,
Engaging in dialogue,
challenging injustice in your own community,
or just treating each other with respect and dignity.
every step counts.
It does.
It all adds up to a more just and equitable world.
And on that note, I'd like to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Okay.
If states are both the biggest protectors and the biggest violators of human rights, what does that tell us about power,
Yeah.
about the role of individuals?
And about the future of human rights in a world that's becoming more and more interconnected every day? That's a really great question. And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
We hope you found it informative
engaging,
and thought-provoking.
and maybe even a little inspiring.
Keep exploring these issues.
Keep learning.
Keep questioning.
And keep fighting for a better world.
A world where human rights are respected and protected for everyone.
Everyone.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe
And hit that notification bell
so you don't miss out on future episodes.
We'll be back soon with more deep dives into the topics that matter.
Until then, keep learning
Keep thinking.
and keep making a difference.